and welcome to this special episode of TESOL Pop. Haven and I are here in Amsterdam attending IBC 2025, and we've got lots to share with you in terms of like the media technology and creativity we're seeing here at one of the largest media technology exhibitions in the world. So we're excited to dive in to some of the highlights we've seen here and how we expect it's going to influence what we do in education. But before we do, Haven, this is your first time on the podcast. Normally you're behind the scenes. Would you like just to introduce yourself and what you do on TESOL Pop and what you do overall?
Yes, so I'm usually behind the cameras, as Laura says. I'm usually doing the editing, the sound correcting, the colour correcting, and the processing of all the tech stuff for the podcast.
And you've been in broadcast for a very long time. This isn't your first IBC. You've been coming here a long time because it is a place where folk like yourself in media and producers like myself too, we come because it does have like the latest in terms of what's happening in the industry. But many people outside our industry don't know what it is. Could you just give a snippet of what IBC is?
Yeah, so IBC is the International Broadcasting Convention, and that's basically all the broadcasters worldwide will congregate in one place. And so a lot of tech companies come to kind of promote their products. So Sony has a huge, I don't want to call it a stand, they've got a huge area. Canon has a big area, Nikon has a big area. And then there's also companies like Elements or Adja who create hard drives. They're here as well promoting their products. There's also networking, as in like computer networks for the future. We talked about 2110, which I could go and talk about for a long time. Basically, it's replacing something. That's going to be interesting. And so this happens every year in Amsterdam. This is the third year in a row that I've come here. Usually I come once every 2 or 3 years. Last time I was here was probably 2015, so it's been a while, apart from the last 3 years.
Yeah, and things are moving really quickly. That's why I've started coming every year, because of the speed of which things are developing. And there is a lot to see here. Now, we can't summarize everything we've seen here. We obviously go with the angle of we help educators create content such as videos and podcasts, and we also do designs. So we've gone with that angle in mind, right? With our production house and clients in mind. But there's so much to see over the 14 halls. We definitely get our 10,000 steps in before midday, don't we?
Easily, yeah.
Where shall we start in terms of like what's a highlight you think is really applicable to listeners of this podcast who, they work in education, they've been in education for a while. Most of them working obviously in language, teaching languages, but as we know, educators wear a lot of hats. Is there a particular tech development that you're excited to share that you think, this is one to watch for educators?
Captioning, that's the big thing for me. From a broadcast perspective, the fact that you can actually live caption in the presenter's language, and then that's also simultaneously translated, both not in text but also in audio as well. So you can hear the AI generated voice repeat the same thing back. So from a broadcast perspective, it's the equivalent of, for instance, watching a football game. Now, in broadcast, football in the UK and the same football match in Germany, there'll be two different broadcasters, same pitches, but two different broadcasters. Now, we can streamline that potentially into the same broadcast, but then you only hear the overdubbing of German and also the subtitles. That's quite impressive. From an educational context with this type of technology, think of it as a lecture, an online lecture. You can have the lecturer in the UK, and they're speaking in English, and that's transmitted to, say, somewhere in South America. And you'll not only have the Spanish subtitles, you also have the overdubbing of that person speaking in Spanish. I think that's quite impressive.
Yeah, it's really opening the doors, isn't it? So if universities and colleges and training centres aren't really thinking about this technology really enables you to go truly global. And I think, some educators listening may think, does this mean that language teaching is going to be at an end? I don't think it is. I think it's opening up those opportunities further for that exchange of ideas and exchange of culture that comes with education. So people can access things that they may not be in the physical space to be able to access, or may not have the language level at that stage to access it. I think it's a wonderful thing that is very, very exciting. We did see it last year, but the pace at which it's developed a range of languages. We saw Justin Dawson, a fellow podcaster from Everything Techie podcast. He was testing out his Irish on this software, and just the speed and accuracy with which it was able to translate, and also the audio dubbing as well, was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, it was incredible. So that'll be a big one to watch out for. So you've been coming here for 3 years now. Between last year and this year, what's the thing that's caught your eye the most?
Well, there's a lot of things. I think the speed at which things are changing. We talked about all the different tech things over the past couple of years. So I think one thing that's particularly different this year is the fact that we have a press pass, and we're able to access even more of the event, and we're able to attend very special talks that give insight to how things are built, the latest best practices, and the creative decisions that go behind huge shows. That was really a highlight, I feel, this year. That's not necessarily something that's changed. It's just something that's changed in how we've interacted with the IBC. So, for example, the kickoff roundtable with the chief technical officers of Warner Brothers and ITV, where they were talking about using tools to adapt to a changing world. I thought that was packed with so much insights. There's like 5 things we could talk about from that talk alone, but is there anything in particular that you would like to highlight from that?
From a personal perspective, the metadata and the tagging that he was talking about, he talked about normally when you search archives, you type in key phrases or keywords such as courtroom or car, but you don't go into specific cars. Or you can do, you say maybe a Ferrari. But with this metadata, you can just type in green car, and it will search through all the potential green cars in a potential library, which opens up a lot more. I personally struggle with typing the correct keywords to find what I want. So for me, this is interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because the metadata is so much richer and it's more human, the way things are tagged. So the example the Warner Brothers Chief Technical Officer, Avi, was saying is we can now get metadata that matches what people are asking for, not just in type searching, but also in searches like Amazon Alexa, for example, or asking Siri if you're using iOS. We don't say, hey, courtroom, Ferrari. I don't know why we're giving these examples, but you don't kind of think of these keywords. You don't think like a machine, you think like a human. And so it's great that the technology is becoming more human-like in like doing more semantic kind of descriptions, and also going into more detail about like what's happening in the scene, the mood of the scene and stuff. And to bring this back to education, we work with people that have huge archives, often, universities, or they want to access huge archives to talk about bits in history or educational anthropology, depending on their subject, right? Yeah. It takes ages to go through that footage or the materials, whatever it may be, because we're often looking for just a title of how it's catalogued. I'm also thinking my own experience when I had to go through the mass observation archives. You just have a very short description, title to go by, but AI is enabling now, at Warner Brothers as an example, they're going into really rich tagging. And this is something, as we see in big media happen, it filters down, and we start seeing that on our phones, for example, and how our photos are tagged, which I think is terrific.
It is, yeah. It's going to open up a whole new world.
It really is. Those pieces of content where you're like, oh, now I think I have something on this, but I can't remember where I put it. And when did I film it? Or when did I take that photo? It's not going to be a case of it's going to take 2 days for you to think about it and be like, oh, wait, I know where it is. The metadata will enable you to say like, hey, Siri, or hey, Alexa, I'm looking for this. And it will help to search through the archives, which I think is terrific. Exactly. There was one other talk that I wanted to discuss, and it was more on the creative side, because we went to a special screening of Becoming Led Zeppelin, which is a knockout documentary for this year. It's done terrifically well. Yeah. If listeners haven't seen it, even if you're not a fan of Led Zeppelin, I'm certainly not, I don't know much about their music, but I was absolutely blown away by the storytelling and the use of archival material. We went to that special screening and we're really lucky to have sat with the director and the sound supervisor for question and answers afterwards, which gave a whole insight to the creative process and the technical process that goes into producing an amazing piece of work like that documentary. Yeah. What were your takeaways from that experience?
I had a lot of tech takeaways because as a techie, I was interested in things like the sound balancing. Jimmy Page was a genius when it came to producing Led Zeppelin's style of music and their sounds. So it was interesting to hear him talk about it, and also how he influenced the sound supervisor to sort of try to mimic or replicate, shall I say, the exact same sound for a cinema audience, which for anyone who's edited on 15.1, it's not that easy to do. It's quite time consuming. So it's quite impressive that they managed to pull it off.
You know what stood out for me through that whole discussion afterwards, and I really appreciate them taking the time to answer questions, was authenticity. And I know that word is thrown around a lot, but we've just talked about like technology being able to do this, that, and the other and do things for us. But what really stood out for me was how they both work so hard to get the best possible copy or best possible recording of that particular moment that they wanted to show from the archives. So they weren't depending on a lot of treatment. I think he said he did a bit of EQ balancing here and there, right? But not too much, because they wanted it to sound like the 60s.
Yeah, and it's just how in-depth they went, because they talked about, because sadly John Bonham's no longer with us, the drummer, and all of them had said to, how are you going to get John on board? Because in interviews he barely spoke. And they managed to find an in-depth interview for a local Australian radio station, but they found it in the Library of Congress. So it's quite incredible how far they went down the archives to try and find it.
Yeah, so. And I think it was 4 years in the making.
Yeah,
and some of those archives took years to track down and to ask people to send the originals, which I think the director said is like asking somebody as a stranger to send their birth certificate to you.
Exactly, yeah.
It's really hard to persuade them. But that was terrific, wasn't it? Just how they were really committed to capturing the sound as it was and getting the best possible recording from that time, which I think was terrific.
And the original members were part of it and they all agreed to do it, which is quite...
That's rare.
It's quite rare,
That's really rare. The other thing I wanted just to mention about that was how much the director had already storyboarded and planned and really had envisioned what the story would be. And you say something when it comes to productions, and that is post-production is solved in pre-production. Do you want to just explain what that is? Because I think this is a really nice...
So but basically, it's all about planning. And in my experience and in my career, should I say, I've worked on countless videos where at the post-production stage, the editing stage, they've said, oh, we'd like this shot or we want this shot. And it's like, well, we don't have it because it wasn't planned, so we didn't shoot it. Or at least it wasn't shot as we'd like. So it's things like a second camera angle that it wasn't requested. So that's what I mean by, you prepare to succeed.
Yeah, and the director had gone to a lot of length, having done the research, storyboarded things, presenting the storyboards. He knew the storyboard inside and out. He didn't need script notes. He knew it. And I think that's obviously, it shines through. The other thing that I wanted to highlight was that he was committed to telling the story, and a story that was human and relatable. And if you have read reviews of this documentary, The Guardian, I thought, gave a very unfair review, again, of a really great piece of work. And the criticism being that it didn't go into the 70s. And we heard the director say, well, that's boring. It's repetitive. The story ends here. They came to their pinnacle.
They got the gold.
They got the gold record.
Yeah.
They established themselves and they'd done amazing work. Everything else after that is like a circle of stories that are very familiar and very repetitive. So he was very committed to telling this story that we could all very much relate to, rather than just rinse and repeat. And I thought that was, a really excellent example of, you can have huge amount of archives, but you really need to think about what's your focus, what's your mission in telling this story and this work you're doing with, which I think is something we can all take away.
Yeah, exactly.
Super. Well, It's been great chatting. I wish we had more time, but that's all we can crack on with. We've got to get on with the day. But if you would like to follow us along, or you want more of this kind of media insights in your life, then you can obviously subscribe to our newsletter. Our production house is Communicating for Impact. And if you go to the website, you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter where we share insights like this, from the tech to the creativity, to inspire you as educators to have a go at that project, use that media, delve through those archives and create something really special. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Haven. First time on the podcast. It's been great.
Thank you very much.
All right. Until next time. Cheerio.